So welcome again, everybody. Welcome to this session organized by the European Union of Yoga. We're very pleased to have you with us today. And we're also very pleased to welcome back François Lorin from the Institut Français de Yoga. François, as I'm sure you probably all know, has been training other teachers for, I think, over 50 years now, doing many other things, translating, lecturing, workshops, all sorts of things. And he's going to be talking today about something that gets talked about a lot in yoga, the yama. Very often we think we know what they are, but I think he's going to be perhaps giving us a bit of food for thought today with a topic entitled what might be an intelligent approach to the yama. And that word intelligent sounds like it's going to be quite key. So François is going to be talking, I think, for about an hour. And then at the end of about an hour, there'll be time for questions. So if you have questions, just as usual, raise your hand, put them in chat, whatever you like. Okay, so over to you, François.
Thank you very much, Joy. Thank you, Luc. And thank you, every one of you, having taken time to listen to what I have to say. First, I will explain why I selected this topic. Some years back, I was part of the education team. I am still part of the education team of the our union. And at that time, Herman Seimus was the coordinator, and we discussed about what exactly the yama could be considered. And his idea, and I agreed with that, is that yama are not a code of ethics, because many people at that time wanted to suggest, and I think it is even written somewhere in the presentation of the European Yoga Union, that the code of ethics is based on yamas, but we both disagreed on that aspect. So I would like to first say that it is a very strong statement that is made by Vyasa, the first commentator of Patanjali, about the importance of ahimsa. I just read what he writes about it. Ahimsa, by the way, is the first yama. There are 5 yamas. I will come back to the yamas a little later, but I just want to state something very necessary to me, it seems to me. Ahimsa is non-injuring of all beings, always, and in all manners. Truth and other forms of observances are based on the spirit of harmlessness. They are the best means of making ahimsa pure. And India has been, from the beginning, convinced that the fact of violence was very wrong. Unfortunately, it is not the path that humanity has followed so far. But India was the cradle in which developed many aspects of this ahimsa. Maybe the strongest is the one of the Jains, you know, the people who walk with a mask on their face not to swallow or breathe animals, and they sweep the ground before them not to crush any small ants or anything like that on the ground. But yoga, it seems, from the commentary of Vyasa, that yoga, Patanjali's yoga share this view. And I want to remind you that yama being the first of what is called ashtanga yoga, the yoga of 8 limbs, we have to understand why this yoga of 8 limbs is proposed. the sutra that speaks about why we should follow the yama, niyama, and other limbs of yoga states that it is the means to reduce impurities and come to what is called viveka, a form of intelligence that can discriminate between what we are really and what we think we are. Unfortunately, it's not so easy to discriminate. Intellectually, yes, but in fact, not so easy to discriminate between what we think we are and what we really are. So it seems that the proposal of yoga is a progressive coming to grip with the question of whom am I, whom I am, and the different limbs, not steps, but limbs. The word used, anga, means limbs. The body of yoga is made of 8 limbs, and you cannot think that there are steps that you have to conquer one after the other. You have to consider that the organism is a whole, and you have to come to it as a whole, except for the fact that the 3 last limbs, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, are mentioned in the 3rd chapter, not in the 2nd chapter, which is the chapter in which the 5 previous limbs are mentioned, the sadhana pada, the chapter about realization, while the 3rd chapter is called vibhuti pada, which means the fruition of the work one has done upon oneself. So meditation in yoga is not something that you practice. Meditation is something that you come to through the respectful trial to put into practice the 5 limbs that are described in the 2nd chapter. The word used is the word anushta, which means to follow closely, to obey these 5 limbs, which are the ones that can be practiced. Of course, you can consider that there are approaches to meditation which are technical, but it is not the state of meditation. When Patanjali describes the 3 last steps, he describes something that is not of the nature of a practice, but the nature of an achievement. So the first thing to consider is, why should we know ourselves as we are? Because what we are in depth is the nature of what we are in depth is inner peace, inner silence, inner tranquility. But before we reach that state in a very stable manner, we are so much fascinated by the experiences provided by life that we all the time forget what is our real nature, and therefore we don't know this inner peace, this inner tranquility, and this inner silence of the mind. So the first idea that comes to one's mind when the yamas are described is that it is a kind of practice. Yes, it is a kind of practice, but what kind of practice? We know, I suppose you know too, how much religions already have said you should not do this, you should do that, and how much it has failed in the story of mankind, because you can try, and if you fail, you feel guilty, and if you succeed, you feel proud. And in both cases, you don't know whom you are. You are still in a kind of ignorance or illusion about whom you are really. So what would be an intelligent approach of the yama? For that, we have to come back to what is the name of yoga in the Brahmanic tradition. It is a darshana. The word darshana in Sanskrit means an instrument which reflects, a mirror. And therefore, we have to look at the 5 first limbs of the 8-limbed yoga, the ashtanga yoga, as mirrors. It is not something like an obligation. It is more something like to point out where we stand with regard to what is said about each of these 5 limbs. For instance, and I was surprised to hear that years ago, Krishnamacharya used to say, for a mild practice of yoga, meat in moderation is allowed seldom. It seems in contradiction with the ahimsa principle, because if you eat flesh, you eat organized living beings, that means they have been killed. If you kill them yourself, it's not so bad, but if you go and buy it in the market, you don't know how it has been killed, and probably in a very harmful way. So you transgress the idea of harmlessness with regard to all beings. Personally, I am very fond of gardening, and each time I garden, I realize that I kill so many human creatures, plants and animals. So it's very difficult to follow the life of the yogis of the past that used to eat only fruits, because eating fruits, you don't harm any living being. It's only a byproduct of the life of the tree. But we have to take this very strong statement of Vyasa that non-injuring of all beings, always in all manners, in a relative way. It helps us to look into our lives and see how often we harm with no intention of harming, and how often we harm with intention of harming, which is worse, of course. So instead of living a heedless life without at all being aware of the moment we harm by word or by act, this should help us to realize what is actually the result of our misunderstanding of whom we are. Because if you knew what we are really, probably most of the occasions in which we harm, consciously or unconsciously, will disappear. This is true of ahimsa, and it is true also of the following yamas, which I will see one by one. So the second one is satya. The word is built on a verb, the verb to be, which gives sat. The verb is as, and it becomes sat, to be. And therefore, it has come to mean truth or authenticity. That means not to depart from what is, neither in action nor in words, and therefore to avoid any occasion of lying, the worst lie probably being to oneself, which is the most common lie, because it's not so easy to see clearly why we say things, why we act in such and such a way. So we very often lie to ourselves about our actions and our thoughts. And it's a very demanding, when you look in a mirror, you see your face and you see you are a liar, you would like to change it. or you see in the mirror you are violent, you would like to change it. But this is a helpless ambition. You cannot change something that is deeply engraved in your nature just because you want to. It means that you need some other event. In my case, I give an example. I was non-vegetarian for many years until about the age of 20, I think. But the first thing that made me consider that I was wrong one day was I was invited by my brother-in-law to a hunting party, and I killed a bird, a pigeon. And I saw the dying glance of this poor bird, and that touched me deeply. But I came back home and I continued eating meat. And then very little afterwards, my mother and myself were invited by a couple. She was Russian of origin and he was American. And they invited us in Paris. And there was a beautiful table with a very nice, I don't know what you call in English, a big piece of beef for my mother and myself. But I saw them eating only avocado nuts and other nuts. And I was very surprised. And I asked them, why do you eat this? And we eat this. How is it? And then they explained that they had been to India and met a Jain teacher, and the way this man talked to them convinced them that they had to stop eating meat. So on that evening, when I came back home, I told, at that time we had a cook, I told the cook, no meat for me ever again. So she laughed. And she said, tomorrow I will cook a chicken for you, we will see. But from then on, no, not anymore any meat or fish for me. It was over. The combination of the two, the glance of the bird and the teaching made me realize that there was no need to eat flesh. So this example just to say that it was not a fight. There was no effort involved. It just happened. And I think a mirror is not there to make us think we ought to change our appearance or character, but just to see it, because seeing what we are is the key to change. That makes us realize. And this realization is enough to affect the change. Because if you do it through effort, you create a resistance, you spend uselessly your energy, you have the feeling of failure, and therefore, it seems to me, it has not much place in the path of yoga. It's the same with asana. If we go further on the 8 limbs, if you make hard efforts to achieve an asana, you hurt yourself, that's all. You don't succeed that way. It requires something else. So the same for the yama. And then, therefore, truthfulness is important, essential, but first you have to see when you lie and why you lie. Just see, just observe, just be aware when it happens. Most of the time it is through fear of consequences if you say the truth. This reminds me of a story that was told in a, well, I don't remember the name of the yogi of the Himalayas who told it, but the story of a railway chief, a railway station chief, I don't know if it is a name in English, the one that is in charge of the railway station, who was very successful. He had a wife and children, a beautiful house. He was he should have been very happy with his life, but he was not. So he talked to a friend, and that friend said to him, "Oh, my guru is coming from the Himalayas. Please come with me. You will meet him and you will ask him some questions about your unhappiness." So he went with a friend and he asked, and the guru said, if you want to be happy from now on, never lie. This impressed so much the railway station master that when he came back, he started saying the truth. But the problem is that all the other people that were in charge with him, they were all lying. And it was very disturbing for them that somebody started saying truth and therefore revealing their own crookedness. So they accused him without proofs, but there were so many to accuse him of the same, I don't know exactly which crookedness they accused him, that policeman, or the judge rather, decided to put him into jail. Well, after a while, he was, of course, freed because there was no real proofs against him. But when he came back home, the house was sold, his wife had gone, he was left with nothing. So it's not so easy to say the truth. It creates risks, and therefore you cannot do it out of the will to respect something. You have to come to that understanding and that maturity that allows you to say the truth without going into such form of risks. And this is why people lie, because they know there is risk. They know there is the fear of the consequences. The third yama is asteya, which means not to steal. Well, that is interesting, because one could have thought that yogis were not so much keen on the idea of property, private property. After all, private property in humanity has come rather late. In the beginning, we own nothing, and like nomads, even today, we could own very little, but this is not the path that humanity has chosen, nor is it the path of non-violence or harmlessness. So I consider that this is one more proof that the yamas are not there, contrarily as what he said, even by Vyasa, only to behave towards others, but mostly to behave for oneself. Because if you steal, peace of mind is something very rare then, because there is always the fear of being caught. So in a sense, you destroy the possibility of your own quietness, your own tranquility. So a reasonable life would be to earn a livelihood which is not opposite to harmlessness, and just to be happy with one is able to earn, which makes feel strange with regard to very well-known people who have been teaching yoga or something equivalent and have had a lot of planes, even not even cars, accumulating money even today. So I know this is not the fate of most yoga teachers, but it is always something that one has to keep in mind. If you look into the mirror and you see only money in your face, it is a very great tragedy if you feel you are a yoga teacher, if you want to be a yoga teacher. The next one is brahmacharya. That is the most complicated one. I just want to read what Vyasa says about it. Brahmacharya suppressing the sense of the sexual organ and of the activities of other sense organs leading to it. Now, this commentary of Vyasa, Krishnamacharya used to alleviate it a little bit, saying that this is a Mahavrata. Patanjali speaks about it a little later on, a big vow, an important vow that can be taken only by people who are renunciant, the Tyagins or Sadhus, people who have renounced the life of most human beings. And this is possible only in India, probably. And this is to come out of the social system, the very organized caste system in India. So you become someone who has no roots, and only such a person can take the vow of total celibacy. So again, if you look at it as an obligation, at least until a certain age, you have a big problem indeed. If you look at it as a mirror in which you can see your behavior and see when there is only the need of the sexual urge to be met, when there is no love in the relationship, I can imagine that you feel ashamed. And this is the beginning of the possibility of coming close to brahmacharya. And also, I want to add that the etymology of the word has nothing to do with sexuality. It means, acharya means to be in a movement towards Brahman, the absolute. So it is the name given to the students at the age of studentship in India. They are called brahmacharins. And because at that time they are asked to restrain sexually, so to have the full energy to study not mathematics or English, but the study was about the quest for the absolute. It has, by derivation, come to mean that even in the Yama-Yoga Sutra. But actually, one of the possibility of understanding brahmacharya is when you go to the sutra which explain that through respecting brahmacharya, you get plenty of energy. That means it is the idea of balance, not to spend your energy uselessly or in a wrong way, but just to keep a balance in your activities. And this Bhagavad Gita is saying too, not to talk too much, not to walk too much, not to make too many physical efforts or mental efforts, not to eat too much, not to sleep too much, but not too little either. So it is the idea of equilibrium. And this also is a good mirror, because in our life today, most of us, we are prone to overdo because we are caught in different systems, jobs, family obligations, and women particularly. And therefore, it is very difficult to keep this balance. But it helps us to realize it. And this is what is important. And the last one is aparigraha. So it is built on the root graha, which means to seize, to grasp. Pari means to grasp all around, and a is negative. So it is the absence of grasping everything completely. It doesn't mean that you cannot own something. It means that if life gives it to you, it's okay. But if life takes it away from you, it should be okay too. And this again is a way of showing us how strongly we are attached to so many things and so many people. There is a difference between attachment and love. And most often love is mixed with attachment. And therefore, we experience jealousy and therefore very often harmfulness, because that creates a havoc in our lives. And therefore, this aparigraha is the last one, but to me, it seems to be a very important one also, because it is, in our society, actually, one of the main causes of injustice, social injustice, and as a yoga teacher, for instance, we should not hold knowledge, we should share it. We should not take pride of knowledge, because knowledge does not, we don't own knowledge. Knowledge has been imparted to us. I mean knowledge, not the knowledge of English or French. Sorry for my English, by the way. But the knowledge about things that matters in life. We are just here to pass it to other people. And therefore, the idea of keeping things for oneself is part of parigraha, which is something which is not correct. So I don't know how much time. Well, I think I said 1 hour. It is very optimistic on my behalf, but it's only about 30 minutes I am talking about the yama. So I think it will be maybe more alive if we can have a dialogue about some of the things I have said, or some of the questions you yourself have about this ashtanga yoga. Before that, however, I would like to remind something. There are two types of yoga: the ashtanga yoga that Patanjali offers, and there is the sadhanga yoga, the yoga with 6 limbs, that was very dear to Krishnamacharya, and my teacher Deshikachar also often spoke about it. But Krishnamacharya used to say that the Ashtanga yoga is a preparation for the Sadhanga yoga. That means the yoga of total surrender to that which detains or owns the ultimate power. Everyone will have a name different for that, but or maybe some people don't have the idea that this exists. But as yoga practitioners, we know that Patanjali mentions Ishvara, that which detains the power, the capacity to reign, and therefore the fundamental path to yoga is what is called also bhakti. That means a capacity to develop a love for that which is the cause of everything. But this today, especially, is very difficult of access to most of us. So through the Ashtanga yoga, and especially the 5 first limbs, there is a kind of purification that allows one to come closer to the realization that one is almost nothing in this vast universe. And as a separate human being, we have no power. And therefore, we start seeing that there is something else, and that something else we can start having trying to have a connection with it. And this is the Sadhanga yoga, also called prapati, which means surrender. Now, if you have questions or if you want to discuss, welcome.
Thank you very much, François. There may well be questions, I'm sure. Maybe just to start, that one thing that occurred to me, you said quite early on, you established your idea that the yama are not a code of ethics, and you explained what they might be instead. So that made me wonder a little bit. So the European Union of Yoga, and I know other yoga organizations as well, who have on occasions taken the yama, or some of the yama in particular, and kind of integrated them, said that these are part of our code of ethics. So I wondered if you had any thoughts on what might be a good basis for a code of ethics for yoga organization. Can you suggest something else? What would your, yeah.
Well, code of ethics is a social procedure to protect people, both to protect the teacher and the students. I think the only code of ethics for a teacher is his own state of consciousness, because otherwise it is a very superficial application of something that is a rule, and it prevents one to really look into one's own way of functioning, teaching, and so on. And we know, you know, how many yoga teachers of renown, of well-known yoga teachers have had attitudes that are not proper, both sexually, financially, in the sense also of putting oneself as the authority, lack of humility, very, very often. So I doubt personally that a code of ethics will really be effective. So I think also that the best protection for students is their own sensitivity and intelligence. This has to be developed by the teacher. If the teacher asks the students to behave in such and such a way, to give some form of obligation, I think that student will sooner or later have problems with that teacher. So I have no suggestion about the content of a code of ethics. For instance, in the Institut Français de Yoga, it is mentioned that a yoga teacher should not impose, well, it's not even that term, I don't remember the term, but any philosophical or religious point of view. But how can you teach about yoga, yoga sutras, without speaking of something which is of the religious nature, even if it is not religious as a religion, or speak about the darshana, the point of view of yoga, without giving philosophical notions? It's impossible. Otherwise, you just teach asana and pranayama techniques. Both are important, but they have no meaning unless they are put into the philosophical and I will not say religious, but spiritual context. Have I answered your question?
Sure. Yeah, no, great. Thank you. So basically what you're saying is any yoga organization that sits down to write a code of ethics is really wasting its time, because
but it is obliged to do so because of society. I don't know in your country or the country of the people who are listening, but in France, we are overprotective of our people for people. The people become children because they lose their sense of autonomy. The more you protect someone, the less he is able to protect himself or herself. So I don't think it is a service to people. the teaching of yoga should make people more and more autonomous or independent, which is the path of yoga. It is called the Swatantra. The path of yoga is called Satyavada, the path of truth. That means whichever happens in truth. That means, for instance, if I have an hallucination, this hallucination for me is truth for the time being, at least, until I wake up from the hallucination. It is called Parinamavada, the path of change. I mean, unless you have realized that everything is a constant flux of change, your teachings have no meaning. I mean, one has to make people understand that nothing is stable except one's inner core. And it is called Swatantravada, the path of autonomy or independence, to be able to do your own, to create your own web, like a spider, you know. It creates its web from its own body. So the student of yoga should create its own life according to its own intelligence and its own sensitivity, and not according to rules. Social rules are just made by human beings. They are not cosmic rules.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Would somebody else like to come in with a question or a comment? Yes.
I suppose I'm just reiterating what you already said, but I found it really, really helpful that you pointed out that they're not actually codes of behavior, because everything reflects back on you. If you harm, the hurt is within you. You know, if you lie, the lie is within you. If you steal, the fear of being caught out, etc. So, because, you know, the way I was taught, it was, you know, my responsibility towards society. And then the next 5 steps are my disciplines personally, you know, my cleanliness and my truthfulness and whatever else. But actually, it's all about correcting what it's all, like, they're all, the yama-s and the niyamas are all about me correcting me. And therefore, then obviously, of course, I will have an impact on society because I'm now a different person, but they're not actually 2 different sets, really.
No, I think that came from Vyasa, actually, this idea that yama are obligations with regard to other people, and niyama are obligation about oneself. His commentary made it so, made it understand that way. But if you are harmful to yourself, trying to be harmless to others, you are in contradiction. So it starts with oneself always. This is the only place in the universe where we can see what is happening and see which action can be taken. Externally, it's only a projection each time. So that's why I say mirror. A mirror is very important because it's only an image, but if you want to see your face, you need a mirror. So if you want to see how you behave, you need some form of mirrorship. And this is the yama and niyama business in a way. But asana also. Asana is a moment where you can see how you function with your own body, with your own breath, with pranayama as well. And therefore, these angas are just... That's why he said, Patanjali said, it is the means to come to viveka, because it's only when you see things as they are that you start realizing that you are not the person you believe to be, until you realize that you are, well, difficult to say what you are, except that you are, and you are conscious. That is the two things that you are you can be sure of. I don't know if I am a man or a woman, a child or an old man. All this is only a very ideas, only ideas. But the fact is, I am, and in this I amness there is consciousness. I am conscious. This I can be sure of.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
I think the mirror and the spider are two quite interesting images that you've used there. I think both quite helpful for thinking about what you've been saying there. Does anybody want to come in or maybe disagree with François? If anybody disagrees, then feel free to give us your point of view.
Nobody will dare disagree.
Speak your truth.
The spider, to me, is a very interesting animal because it creates its web in the moments. Of course, probably the genetics is behind it and so on, but most of the time, we as human beings, we project, we plan, we think in advance, instead of letting things come out of us without preconception, thinking it over beforehand and so on. So the more we realize we have the capacity to, let us say, improvise, just to let our creativity and our inner voice speak the best we feel in our lives. And that's why the spider for me is a very interesting image. Yes. Not to quote flies, that will be a himsa. So I am not trying to catch you. I just want to share the fact that independence is very important in yoga. There is no freedom otherwise. Which does not mean that union like the European Union of Yoga is used less, because it can be a place of sharing. But the problem is, to me, so far in Zinal, there has been no sharing between the teachers. There was no occasion for the teachers to share their point of views, their way of teaching. People come and they can go and practice or listen to so and so, but there is no real communication between the teachers, and that I think maybe one day could change.
That's a good point. Yep. Yeah. Susanna wanted to come in, I think. We can't hear you yet, Susanna. For some reason.
Susanna, I don't see with Susanna.
Volume needs to go up. I'm not sure.
Susanna.
No, we still can't hear you. I can see your microphone is open, but maybe the volume, is your volume?
Ah, Susanna,
Yep.
yes.
Susanna Strauss.
That's funny. Yes, we don't hear you.
Not hearing you.
If you cannot be heard, maybe you can write your question. If it is a question, I don't know. Ah, there is a question, actually, I see. I'd like to ask something, yes.
It might be quite long, yeah.
Ah.
Maybe she has quite a lot to say. So it's unfortunate we can't hear you. Does anybody else want to come in while Susanna is trying to be heard?
Yes, Anne-Marie is waving her hand.
It was very helpful what you said about the mirror. Also, just this is a little point about the spider, that I just love that image. But when the spider's weaving its web, it actually at a certain point changes its thread and it begins to move inward at that point. So I think that's very
From
interesting.
the outside to the inside. Yes. Great.
And
Thank
it
you.
deliberately pauses and changes thread and then begins to move inward. So.
Thank you. So, Suzanne, not working? You have a mic on your.
Sure.
Yes. Ah, the mystery of Zoom.
Yeah.
So, no
Anybody
more
else?
questions. Suzanne, if you have a question, you can send it to, I don't know, to me or to Joy or to Luc, and I can try to answer by mail.
There is the email from which everybody will be receiving the recording at the end, probably the next day or two. So you could use that email to respond if you wanted. You could send your question and then we can make sure it gets to François and he will give you an answer. It's a bit unfortunate we can't hear you just now. I'm not sure what else we can do because it looks like your mic is open. So.
Wow, I have very young listeners.
Yeah, starting young. Very good.
Well,
before we finish, François, this might be too big a question. So, but another thing, a few people have alluded to it. I just wondered if you wanted or if you felt this was appropriate to say anything about the articulation with the niyama. So I think we're mentioning earlier about the yama and the niyama and them not really being separate. So I just wondered if you wanted to say any more about that.
Well,
that might be another lecture. So
the niyama is very interesting because the three first niyamas are already present in the first sutra of the second chapter as Kriya Yoga. I translate Kriya Yoga as action yoga. That means not the yoga of action, but action yoga. That means that has to take place instantly. The idea of a certain discipline, tapas, which I take in the sense of course, in Sanskrit, it means to heat or to cook, to put fire. But it is the need for discipline in the sense, the capacity and the desire to learn, which is the meaning in the European language of discipline. And so there is no yoga without a disciple. That means somebody who is ready to learn. And Swadhyaya, the capacity with this desire to learn, to observe oneself, because the only valid learning in yoga is to learn about oneself, how one behaves, how one thinks, how one acts. And this is from moment to moment. It is not something that you acquire once and for all. It's always on the move. And Ishvara Pranidhana as act without projecting yourself in the future with regard to the results and so on, but act as well as you can now. These three seems to me very fundamental attitudes, maybe more important than Ashtanga yoga, because if you come to these angas without this action yoga, I think you have missed something. That's why it starts like this, the second chapter. It is said, Kriya Yoga, to reduce the kleshas and to come closer to samadhi. Samadhi being the end result of the whole process of the discipline of yoga. Now, the two others, which come before that actually, Shaucha and Santosha, same. If you take it as an obligation, then you come to these meetings of yoga people where each one has a specific need for this type of food, no gluten, no milk, not this, not that, organic food, a kind of obsession about purity, which is the meaning of Shaucha, while what is important, it seems to me, again, is to see the second part of the definition of Shaucha, which has to do with purity of intentions, purity of mind, purity of thoughts, and then therefore again it's a mirror to see how we function, how we fail to be at the altitude of purity. And Santosha, beautiful to be happy with what one has and with what one is, more important. Many people in yoga I meet, they all want to change something in themselves as if it was possible. Well, of course, you can go to a surgeon that will reduce the, how do you say that, the crease? No, the rides.
Wrinkles.
Yes, the wrinkles. But this is stupid. I mean, the deep change about temperament, character, they cannot be made. Otherwise, you are not yourself anymore. So you have to see whom you are and accept it as it is, which whom you are is only at the superficial level. Once you have accepted to be as you are, physically, emotionally, mentally, then there is a possibility to delve more deeply and find out behind that whom you are really. But if you don't accept yourself and you spend your energy trying to change something that cannot be changed because it is the history of the whole mankind that has bring you to be what you are, the whole mankind and the whole of the universe, it is a waste of time and a waste of energy. This is my opinion, only an opinion. But I feel it's very important. I am as I am, as a person, and no need to change anything, just to see the way I function, and though seeing the way I function, something changes. So yama, niyama, same story.
Yeah. That's quite an interesting contradiction that you just picked up there, François, because like you were saying, I think a lot of people do come to yoga looking for change, or thinking that it's going to bring them some kind of change, whether it's, you know, physical, mental, whatever it might be. And yet you're saying precisely, no, that's not possible. Well,
people who are supple, they are the people you see on pictures about asanas. You rarely see in books pictures of people who are very unsupple, stiff. That was the word I was looking for. But people who are very in posture that requires a lot of strength, they are naturally gifted with that strength to hold these postures, and that's why they are chosen to take the picture. But to make a supple person, a hyper lax person, strong is a very difficult task. I mean, it requires for that person to practice every day the proper asanas, and eventually there will be some change in the body. And the same way, somebody who is very stiff, that person has to practice every day and do it with the gentleness and patience and so on. And maybe eventually it will be a little less stiff at the end. It's a lot of energy spent to change something on the physical level. To speak of the other levels, emotional, mental levels, I mean, you can acquire knowledge. You can acquire some knowledge through effort also. You can, at my age, I wouldn't dare try to learn a new language. I speak already very badly English, but at least I speak a little English. But I'm not going to learn Italian, even if I go to live in Italy, which is for the time being not a project, because it is too much effort. The only effort that is worth doing is to go deep into the question, who am I? This is the only question that matters. So spending one's energy in trying to change the periphery prevents one to go to the center. This is also my point of view. Go to the center, and then to go to the center, you have to accept that you are as you are. If you are a liar or a coward, well, you are a coward, you are a liar. The yama tell you, oh, I am a coward or I am a liar. This can maybe change something if you realize it. That means, we say in French, prise de conscience.
So kind of becoming aware. Yeah.
Yes.
And awareness. Yeah.
If you become aware of something, that creates a condition for a change, but it is not a change out of will power. So this is the only change that is possible through awareness. But for the awareness to come into being, you have to stop thinking and trying to change yourself instead of recognizing that you are as you are.
Yeah, I like that idea about the center versus the, well, in comparison to the periphery. That's a useful image as well. Yeah.
This is the real meaning of yoga. I mean, the periphery is only, you can quieten the periphery for a very short while. That means the experience of most people, especially those who don't practice every day, but come to a yoga class. After the yoga class, they feel, wow, fantastic, I'm great. An hour later or one day later, the turmoil that is their lives has taken over, and they wait for the next class to find again some peace and some quietness. This is a shame, but at the same time, it is so. I mean, it is a fact in modern days. So this will not help people to come to what could be called the state of yoga. I think it is better to be in turmoil and see that we are in turmoil than to try to put a plaster on the turmoil and think it's okay, because you don't change anything in your life then. So unless you really are keen on going to the depths of the inquiry about whom you are, the idea of solitude in yoga, kaivalyam, to reach the solitude of and the inner peace and tranquility of our real being, is the only valid spending of energy. And it does not prevent from doing what you have to do in daily life. Simply, it will help you to maybe quit some toxic relationships or activities. It will help you to make your life more simple. This is possible.
Okay.
And I know because I have been a yoga teacher, very active during many years, because I have 2 children and I had to earn enough money to raise them and so on. So I was a bit like what to say? How do you say força in English?
Well, literally, a força literally is like somebody who's doing hard labor, sort of.
Yeah, a very hard
Yeah.
laboring yoga teacher. This is so stupid. I mean, it took me a little time before I realized that it was completely in contradiction with the values of yoga and the possibility of deepening the understanding and the questioning of what yoga is. So, of course, now my life is much quieter. I have more time, but I think all of us have to look into why we get caught in so many forms of prisons, imprisonments.
Mm. Okay, thank you. Okay, final opportunity for somebody to make a comment, ask a question before we
say
our session.
bye-bye. I'm sorry, but it is particularly bad, my English this evening. I am aware of that.
At all, not at all. Your English is perfect. I think everybody's understood everything that you've said. So
Oh, good.
no problems at all. I think we're all fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wish you all to find the right attitude with regard to the yama-s, because it's not simple. But it is not simple to have the right attitude with asanas or pranayama either. So the way of effortlessness, not in the sense of being lazy or inconsequent, but in the sense of not trying hard when it's not possible to reach through this type of way of doing, but rather to find a way to do it with intelligence. That means effortlessly. That, after all, this is one of the very important teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, and the distinction between karma, to be caught in the network of action-reaction, vikarma, which I understand differently than most translators, since Deshikacha told me vikarma is the intelligence of mankind to create technological tools, like asana is a vikarma, intelligent approach through the body towards meditation is a vikarma. Pranayama is a vikarma, but also internet is vikarma. I mean, any technological outcome of human intelligence is vikarma. But the last one is the most important, akarma, to be acting without the sense of being the actor, therefore effortlessly, to me, is the utmost form of action. And it's amazing when it happens that things are done without the feeling of being the doer and without any effort. And this I wish you all to come to.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you, François. Thank you, François, very much indeed.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, all of you.
For your talk and for responding to our questions. Thank you also very much to Luc, who opened up the session and has done all the Zoom work in the background. And thank you everyone for coming along. It's nice to have you here to listen to François this evening. He will be talking again on Thursday in French. So if anybody would like to listen again in French,
It will not be the same, probably. Well, some things will be the same, but it will be different.
It's always a bit different in a different language. So if anybody is able to follow a talk on the Yama in French, then please feel free to come along on Thursday.
Welcome.
And there will be more talks next week, one in German on Tuesday and one in English on Friday. So again, if you want to come along to those, please do. You'll get the recording, of course, of this evening. That will come to you into your email. And there'll also be a little link to a questionnaire to give us a bit of feedback. If you've got a couple of minutes, then please do fill that in. And in the meantime, if there are any more questions, and particularly Susanna, if you'd like to email through your questions or your comments, then please do that, and we'll make sure they get to François. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely
Namaste.
evening, and we'll maybe see you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, François.